A young girl went missing at the small-town Sunday market, vanishing after being left out of sight for only a brief moment. But 2 years later, something shocking is found inside a loaf of bread, a discovery that changes everything. Jennifer Walsh sat in the windowless interview room of the Oakdale Police Department, a space she had come to know intimately over the past 2 years. The walls were a pale institutional green with a single corkboard displaying community notices and safety pamphlets. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, creating shadows under Jennifer's tired eyes as she recounted, for what felt like the 100th time, the day her 12-year-old daughter Sophie vanished. "We arrived at the market around 9, Jennifer said mechanically, the words worn smooth from repetition. Sophie was in a good mood that morning. She'd been looking forward to it all week. She took a deep breath and revisited that Sunday morning at the farmer's market. How Sophie had been excited about getting fresh pastries from the local vendors. How Jennifer had allowed her to walk just a few stalls ahead to look at a display of handmade bracelets while Jennifer paid for produce, and how those 3 minutes of separation had turned into a lifetime of anguish when she looked up to find her daughter gone without a trace. Detective Martinez sat across from her at the metal table, his notepad open though he hadn't written anything new in months. The detective, a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and weathered skin that spoke of years spent in the field, had been assigned to Sophie's case since the beginning. Jennifer noticed the way his pen hovered above the paper, as if waiting for her to suddenly remember a crucial detail that had eluded them all this time. Her gaze drifted towards the wall, lost in the memory. "She was so happy that morning," Jennifer murmured, her voice catching, chattering about that fantasy series she loved so much. The Moonstone Chronicles? She'd just started the 5th book and couldn't stop talking about what might happen to Princess Arya. I can almost hear her theories now, just before everything went quiet. She pressed her lips together, fighting back tears. When I looked up, she was gone. Just vanished. No trace. The last words were barely a whisper, swallowed by the sterile quiet of the room. "I know this is difficult," Martinez said, his voice gentle but professional. "But going over these details again might help us see something we missed before." Jennifer nodded, though she didn't believe it. They'd been over that Sunday morning hundreds of times, dissected every second, interviewed every vendor and shopper they could find. Nothing had ever come of it. Detective Martinez slid a folder toward Jennifer containing the latest field reports from patrol officers who still occasionally followed up on Sophie's case. He spoke in a gentle tone, explaining that they'd interviewed 3 more people who responded to the renewed flyers Jennifer distributed last month, but none of the leads panned out. Jennifer nodded mechanically, having grown accustomed to disappointment. The folder contained the same photos she'd memorized. Sophie before she disappeared. The sight of her daughter's face, frozen in that last moment of happiness, sent a familiar jolt of pain through Jennifer's chest. "We're not giving up," Martinez assured her, though they both knew the reality. After 2 years, the chances of finding Sophie diminished with each passing day. Missing children cases rarely ended happily after so much time. Jennifer reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook filled with her own meticulously documented observations and leads. As an elementary school librarian, organization had always been her strength, and she'd applied those skills to her daughter's case with desperate intensity. She flipped through pages of handwritten notes, cross-references, and annotated maps. "I've been thinking about the delivery man who mentioned seeing a girl who looked like Sophie near Westlake Park last month," she said, her finger tracing a line of her neat handwriting. "I went there every day for a week, same time, but didn't see anything. But what if we expanded the search radius? What if he saw her on her way somewhere else?" Martinez watched with a mix of admiration and concern. He'd seen how Jennifer's pursuit had consumed her life, causing her to take an extended leave from the school where she once found joy in introducing children to the world of books. Her persistence was remarkable and heartbreaking. "We'll look into it," he promised, though they both knew it was likely another dead end. The sudden ringtone cut through the room's somber atmosphere. Jennifer fumbled in her bag for her special phone, the one with a number printed on all of Sophie's missing posters, the line dedicated solely for tips about her daughter. Her hands trembled slightly as she extracted the phone, a flicker of hope lighting her features despite the countless disappointments that came before. "Hello?" she answered, her voice carefully controlled. Detective Martinez straightened in his chair, watching Jennifer's expression shift from cautious hope to stunned disbelief. The color drained from her face as she listened to the caller. Her free hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. "You found what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Martinez leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "I'll be right there," Jennifer said, ending the call. She looked up at Martinez, her eyes wide. "That was Brenda Collins, a fifth-grade teacher from the neighborhood, only a few streets away. She found—" Jennifer's voice broke. "She found Sophie's bracelet in a loaf of bread." Jennifer's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel of her sedan, following Detective Martinez's police cruiser through the familiar streets of their small town. Her mind raced with possibilities, having experienced too many false alarms over the past 2 years to fully embrace hope. There was the psychic who claimed Sophie was near water. The town had a lake, making the vision conveniently vague. The reported sighting at a mall 3 counties over that turned out to be a different child, and the anonymous caller who demanded money for information that never materialized. Yet something in Brenda Collins' voice sounded different. Genuine shock rather than misplaced certainty. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the residential streets as Jennifer followed Martinez's car into a quiet subdivision of ranch-style homes. The neighborhood was typical of Oakdale. Neat lawns, modest houses, bicycles abandoned in driveways by children called in for dinner. It was the kind of place where people assumed they were safe, where parents let their children play outside without constant supervision. Jennifer once believed that, too. They pulled up to a yellow house with white trim and neatly tended flower beds. Jennifer recognized it as Brenda Collins' home. She'd been here once for a school function before Sophie disappeared. That was in another lifetime, when Jennifer still had PTA meetings and school events on her calendar instead of police appointments and search efforts. Brenda Collins opened the door to her modest ranch-style home before they could even knock, her face pale with concern. As a fifth-grade teacher at Oakdale Elementary, she knew Sophie well, having had her in class the year before she disappeared. She was a petite woman in her mid-40s, with short auburn hair and kind eyes now filled with worry. "Jennifer," she said, reaching out to squeeze Jennifer's arm. "Detective Martinez, thank you for coming so quickly." Jennifer stepped inside, noticing the familiar smell of chalk and art supplies that clung to teachers even in their homes. Detective Martinez followed, his presence solid and reassuring behind her. The house was neat but lived in, with stacks of papers to be graded on the dining table and framed student artwork on the walls. Jennifer spotted one of Sophie's watercolor paintings, a multicolored dragon soaring over a castle, and her throat tightened. "It's in the kitchen," Brenda said, leading them through the living room. "I was going to make a sandwich for lunch when—" She trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. Brenda led them to her kitchen, where a partially sliced loaf of bread sat on a wooden cutting board. A serrated bread knife rested beside it, the blade reflecting the overhead lights. Jennifer noticed immediately that something unusual protruded from the cut surface, alternating purple and blue beads embedded within the bread itself. As she leaned closer, her breath caught in her throat. A heart-shaped amethyst pendant was partially visible among the beads, nestled within the soft interior of the loaf. She didn't need to examine it closely to know it was Sophie's bracelet, the one she gave her daughter for her 10th birthday, the same one visible on her wrist in the market photos from the day she disappeared. "I was slicing the bread and the knife hit something hard," Brenda explained, her voice shaking slightly. "At first, I thought it was just a hard spot in the dough, but then I saw the beads. When I recognized the heart pendant—" She looked at Jennifer. "I couldn't believe it. I remember Sophie wearing it at school." Jennifer instinctively reached toward it, but Detective Martinez gently caught her wrist, shaking his head. "We need to preserve any potential evidence," he explained softly. He took out his phone and carefully photographed the bread from multiple angles before using gloved hands to delicately extract the bracelet. The pendant and beads appeared remarkably intact despite having gone through a baking oven, and the cord was only slightly discolored, made of a heat-resistant material that somehow survived the baking process. Jennifer collapsed into a kitchen chair, clutching the edge of the table for support as tears streamed down her face. She spoke in a broken whisper, confirming to Detective Martinez that this was undoubtedly Sophie's bracelet. Brenda explained that she bought the bread yesterday evening from Franklin's Bakery on Main Street, a well-established local business run by the same family for generations. "Do you still have the wrapper or bag from the bread?" Martinez asked, placing the bracelet carefully in an evidence bag. Brenda nodded, retrieving a paper bag from the recycling bin under her sink. "Franklin's Bakery," printed in gold lettering across a white bag with the date stamp from yesterday. "This is— I don't understand," Jennifer whispered, staring at the bracelet in the evidence bag. "How could Sophie's bracelet end up in a loaf of bread? After 2 years?" Detective Martinez carefully took the bracelet from Jennifer, sealing the evidence bag while explaining they'd need to confirm it forensically, though he didn't doubt Jennifer's identification. "We're going to find out," Martinez assured her, his voice firm with renewed determination. "This is the first tangible lead we've had in Sophie's case. We'll go to Franklin's Bakery immediately." Jennifer nodded in understanding, having learned much about police procedure over the past 2 years of working closely with law enforcement. She stood up shakily, gathering her composure. "I'm coming with you," she said. It wasn't a request. Martinez considered arguing, but recognized the resolve in her eyes. "Stay with me at all times," he conceded, "and let me do the talking." Jennifer sat in Detective Martinez's unmarked police car, parked across from Franklin's Bakery. The late morning sun glinted off the bakery's large front windows, where fresh loaves and pastries were artfully displayed. The brick building, with its striped awning and gold-lettered sign, had been a fixture in downtown Oakdale for as long as Jennifer could remember. The scent of fresh bread wafted across the street, a smell that once brought comfort, but now made her stomach clench with anxiety. She watched as plainclothes officers entered the establishment while uniformed police created a perimeter, their movements practiced and efficient. Martinez had insisted she stay in the car, promising to return with news as soon as possible. Through the bakery windows, she could see the officers speaking with an older man she recognized as George Franklin, the bakery's owner and primary baker. He appeared to be responding calmly, gesturing toward the back of the shop as he spoke with the officers. Time slowed to an excruciating crawl as Jennifer waited, her mind swimming with possibilities. The bakery was one of the places she distributed flyers when Sophie first disappeared. She remembered George Franklin, the elderly owner, expressing sympathy and promising to keep an eye out. He even donated bread for the volunteer search parties that combed the woods and parks in those first desperate weeks. Jennifer watched the police activity, wondering how her daughter's bracelet could have ended up in bread from this shop. Was it placed there at the bakery? During delivery? At the distribution center? The number of people who might have had contact with that dough before it became bread seemed overwhelming. Through the windshield, Jennifer observed the police methodically working their way through the bakery. One officer appeared to be taking photographs of the kitchen area, visible through the swinging door at the back of the shop. Another spoke with the young cashier, a college-aged girl Jennifer didn't recognize. The activity inside seemed thorough, but unhurried, suggesting they hadn't found anything immediately alarming. A group of curious onlookers gathered at the police perimeter, their expressions a mix of concern and morbid curiosity. Jennifer sank lower in her seat, not wanting to be recognized. Since Sophie's disappearance, she'd become an unwilling local celebrity, the subject of sympathetic glances and whispered conversations whenever she ventured into town. Some people avoided her entirely, as if her tragedy might be contagious. Others approached with awkward condolences or, worse, invasive questions. The isolation had been nearly as painful as the loss itself. Detective Martinez finally emerged from the bakery after nearly 2 hours, his expression grim as he slid into the driver's seat. He smelled of flour and yeast as he turned to Jennifer and shook his head. "The officers found nothing suspicious in the bakery," he explained, his voice tinged with disappointment. George Franklin appeared genuinely shocked about the bracelet and was fully cooperative. He provided documentation that showed he receives pre-made dough from Midwest Baking Distribution, a large company that supplies dozens of bakeries throughout the state. Jennifer's hope deflated. So it could have been put in the bread anywhere along the way? At the distribution center? During transport? Martinez nodded. Franklin even called his supplier while we were present, trying to help trace the source. The representative confirmed they supply dough to at least 30 bakeries in a 3-state area. Martinez sighed, explaining that this complicated the investigation significantly. They'd need to examine the entire supply chain, from the distribution company to its suppliers of raw ingredients, to determine how Sophie's bracelet ended up in the bread. "What about Franklin himself?" Jennifer asked. "Did he seem suspicious in any way?" "Not particularly," Martinez replied. "He seemed genuinely concerned and offered to provide any assistance he could. He's been running that bakery for over 30 years, has no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. There's nothing to indicate he'd be involved in Sophie's disappearance." Jennifer stared out the window at the bakery, studying its cheery facade. So what now? Martinez started the car and pulled away from the bakery. He told Jennifer they needed to go to the station to process the bracelet as evidence. "We'll start by contacting the distribution center, getting records of everyone who might have handled that particular batch of dough. And we'll check if any of their employees have connections to Sophie's case or similar incidents." The drive was mostly silent, Jennifer staring out the window at the familiar streets, now transformed by the surreal events of the day. The town passed by in a blur of spring colors, blooming dogwoods, fresh green grass, flower beds bright with tulips. It was the same season as when Sophie disappeared, and the similarity made Jennifer's chest ache. At the station, Jennifer waited in a plastic chair beneath harsh fluorescent lights while forensic technicians photographed, measured, and swabbed the bracelet. She watched through a window as they worked, treating the small piece of jewelry like the vital evidence it was. Every so often, one of the technicians glanced up at her, their expression a mixture of professional focus and personal sympathy. After an hour, Martinez approached with paperwork for her to sign. Since the bracelet was technically her property and had tremendous personal value, she could take it home as long as she agreed to make it available if they needed it again. Jennifer signed the forms and accepted the evidence bag containing the bracelet. The ride home was quiet, with Martinez promising to call the moment they learned anything new about the distribution center. As they pulled up to her house, the setting sun cast long shadows across her front lawn. The mailbox overflowed with flyers and catalogs she hadn't bothered to collect in days. A porch light she left on this morning glowed weakly in the dusk. Jennifer thanked him, stepped out of the car, and walked up her driveway. She unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and leaned against it after it closed, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the day. The bracelet in its evidence bag felt impossibly heavy in her hand, both a connection to her missing daughter and a reminder of how little they truly knew about what happened to Sophie. Jennifer pushed herself away from the door and made her way to the living room, where she slumped onto the sofa. The air conditioner hummed steadily, the only sound in the otherwise silent house. She placed the evidence bag containing Sophie's bracelet on the coffee table and stared at it, the purple heart pendant visible through the clear plastic. This tangible connection to her missing daughter felt like both a blessing and a curse, the first real evidence in 2 years, yet it offered no immediate answers about Sophie's whereabouts or what happened to her. Jennifer rose and walked down the hallway to what was once her home office. She pushed open the door to what her sister now called the War Room, a space entirely dedicated to finding Sophie. The walls were covered with maps of the town and surrounding areas, marked with colored pins indicating where searches were conducted and possible sightings reported. A large corkboard displayed a timeline of the case, with index cards noting each lead, interview, and search effort. Newspaper clippings about similar cases were pinned alongside printouts of missing children's statistics and child recovery stories. Stacks of missing person flyers in various designs sat on the desk, ready for distribution. A bookshelf held binders of organized information, witness statements, police reports, and Jennifer's own detailed notes. The room was illuminated by a single desk lamp, casting the maps and photos in a harsh light that created more shadows than clarity. Jennifer flipped on the overhead light and moved to the largest map, a detailed rendering of Oakdale and the surrounding area. Jennifer's fingers traced along a red string connecting the Sunday market where Sophie disappeared to various points of interest, including the middle school Sophie would have attended, the parks she loved, and the lake where one supposed psychic claimed she might be found. Franklin's Bakery was marked on the map, but only as one of many businesses in the downtown area where Jennifer distributed flyers. There was no string connecting it to any theory of Sophie's disappearance. Jennifer stared at the bakery's pin, wondering about the supply chain Detective Martinez had described. How many facilities would the dough pass through before becoming bread? How could Sophie's bracelet have entered that process? She didn't add any new connections yet, not having enough information to form a theory, but she circled the bakery's location with a red marker, noting it as the endpoint where her daughter's bracelet mysteriously surfaced after 2 years. The shrill ring of the house phone startled Jennifer from her thoughts. She hurried to the kitchen to answer it, hoping it might be Martinez with news, though she knew it was more likely to be her sister checking in as she did every evening. "Hello? Jen, it's me." Her sister Karen's voice came through the line. "How are you doing today?" Jennifer hesitated, unsure where to begin. Something happened, Karen. Something big. She explained about the bracelet found in the bread, the investigation at Franklin's Bakery, and the current dead end with the distribution center. Karen listened without interrupting, gasping softly when Jennifer described recognizing Sophie's bracelet embedded in the loaf. "That's incredible," Karen said finally. "Do you think this means she's alive?" The question hung in the air, the possibility both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't know," Jennifer admitted, "but it means something. It's the first real evidence we've had in 2 years." After promising to call if anything new developed and assuring Karen she'd try to eat something, Jennifer hung up and returned to the war room. The photo album from the day of Sophie's disappearance sat on her desk, open to the last pictures taken before her daughter vanished. Jennifer hadn't looked at these photos in months. The pain of seeing Sophie's smiling face, unaware of what was about to happen, became too much to bear regularly. But now, with the bracelet providing the first real lead in 2 years, she forced herself to examine every detail with fresh eyes. She flipped slowly through the pages, studying the background of each shot, looking for anything or anyone that might have seemed insignificant before but could be crucial now. The market had been bustling that day, with dozens of vendors selling everything from fresh produce to handcrafted jewelry. The photos captured slices of that atmosphere. Sophie examining flowers at one stall, Jennifer and Sophie sharing a pastry at another, Sophie posing beside a display of colorful vegetables. In one photo, Sophie stood at the Sunday market in her bright turquoise sleeveless dress, her braces visible as she smiled widely. She was holding a small wicker basket containing pastries and bread rolls, her purple and blue beaded bracelet clearly visible on her wrist. Behind her was a bread stall with colorful sunflower-patterned tablecloths and baskets of various baked goods arranged in neat rows. Jennifer's eyes widened as she recognized the vendor standing directly behind Sophie. George Franklin, in his white baker's cap and shirt, the same baker who showed the police his supply documentation earlier today. He was clearly visible in the frame, smiling as he arranged bread in a display basket just a few feet behind her daughter. Jennifer sat back, stunned by the connection. She didn't recall the police ever mentioning that they had interviewed Franklin as a potential witness. At least not until today, after the bracelet was found in his bread. Perhaps he saw something, someone watching Sophie, or noticed which direction she went after leaving the bread stall. She pulled out her notebook and jotted down this new observation, circling it several times for emphasis. Then she flipped through the other photos, looking more carefully at the backgrounds, searching for Franklin in any other shots. She found him in two more, once in the background as Sophie examined a flower stall, and again as Jennifer and Sophie walked past his bread display. The realization that Franklin was so close to Sophie on the day she disappeared sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. While it could be coincidental, Franklin's bakery was a fixture at the Sunday market. The fact that Sophie's bracelet turned up in bread from his shop after all this time seemed too strange to dismiss. Jennifer turned to her computer and searched for information about George Franklin. The bakery's website was simple and outdated, mentioning only that Franklin's had been an Oakdale institution for over 30 years, owned and operated by George Franklin, a third-generation baker. There was little personal information about the man himself. A social media search yielded only a basic business page for the bakery with photographs of breads and pastries, but nothing about Franklin personally. It seemed the baker had maintained a minimal online presence, unusual in this digital age, but not unheard of for someone of his generation. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, mind racing with possibilities. Could Franklin have seen something crucial on the day Sophie disappeared? Could he somehow be connected to her disappearance? The coincidence felt too significant to ignore, yet she had nothing concrete to justify her growing suspicion. She knew she should call Detective Martinez with this discovery, but hesitated. The police had just finished interviewing Franklin today and found nothing suspicious. Would they take her seriously if she called now with what amounted to a coincidence that Franklin happened to be in photos from the market that day? Of course he was there. His bakery had a stall. It wasn't evidence of anything nefarious. Still, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that this connection mattered. She resolved to speak with Franklin herself, casually, to see if he remembered anything about that day. Perhaps he noticed Sophie at his stall, or saw her afterward. At the very least, she might learn something about how her daughter's bracelet ended up in his bread 2 years later. Decision made, Jennifer closed the photo album and checked the time. It was nearly 9 p.m., but she knew bakeries often operated on early schedules. She'd visit Franklin's first thing in the morning, when the baker would likely be preparing the day's goods. She set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. and tried to get some sleep. But rest eluded her. Jennifer tossed and turned, sleep eluding her as her mind raced with possibilities. The images from the market photos kept replaying in her mind. Sophie smiling, Franklin in the background, the bracelet on her daughter's wrist. Could the baker have seen something crucial? Could he have been overlooked in the initial investigation? The questions circled endlessly, preventing any possibility of rest. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m., and realized bakers typically start work in the pre-dawn hours to prepare for morning customers. On a sudden impulse, she decided to drive to Franklin's bakery, thinking he might already be there preparing the day's goods. This could be her chance to speak with him without interruptions or other customers present. Jennifer quickly dressed, grabbed her keys, and headed downtown. The streets were deserted at this hour, street lights casting pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalks. Oakdale was not a place with much nightlife, even the bars closed by 1 a.m. on weeknights. She passed only one other car, a police cruiser that slowed briefly as it passed her before continuing on its patrol. As she approached the bakery, she noticed lights glowing from within despite the closed sign, confirming her hunch that Franklin started his workday while the rest of the town slept. Jennifer parked across the street, gathering her courage before deciding to approach the store. Part of her knew this was impulsive, potentially even reckless, but the desperate need for answers outweighed caution. Through the windows she could see movement in the back of the bakery. A figure, presumably Franklin, moved between the counters, though from this distance she couldn't make out exactly what he was doing. Jennifer crossed the street and approached the front door. There was a small side door nearby, probably used for deliveries, and as she hesitated by the main entrance, this side door suddenly opened. George Franklin emerged, carrying what appeared to be a garbage bag. He was wearing the same white baker's uniform she recognized from the market photos, though now it was dusted with flour. He froze when he saw Jennifer standing near the entrance, clearly surprised by her presence at this hour. "We're closed," he called out, his voice gruff. "Won't open until 6. Jennifer stepped forward into the pool of light cast by the bakery windows. "Mr. Franklin, I'm Jennifer Walsh, Sophie Walsh's mother. I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment." Recognition dawned on Franklin's face. It was the look of stark recognition Jennifer had seen countless times, the unavoidable acknowledgment given to the mother whose daughter's face was displayed on posters in his own window. He hesitated, glancing back at the bakery door before setting the garbage bag down beside a dumpster. He approached cautiously, wiping his hands on his apron. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm sorry, but this is a strange hour for a visit." Jennifer nodded, aware of how unusual this must seem. "I know, and I apologize. I couldn't sleep, and I remembered bakers work early hours. The police were here earlier about the bracelet found in one of your loaves." Franklin's expression softened with what appeared to be sympathy. "Yes, a terrible business. I told the officers I have no idea how something like that could happen. I get my dough from Midwest Distribution. Whatever was in it didn't come from my shop." "I understand," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I was looking through some photos from the day Sophie disappeared, and I noticed you were there, at the market. Your stall was right near where Sophie was last seen." Franklin appeared to consider this, then unlocked the door, inviting her in. "Why don't you come inside?" "It's chilly out here, and I've just made fresh coffee." Jennifer hesitated only briefly before following him into the warmth of the bakery. The familiar scent of baking bread enveloped her, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. Sophie had loved fresh bread, had always begged to stop at bakeries whenever they passed one. Franklin offered her a chair at a small table in the corner of the front area, then disappeared briefly into the back, returning with 2 mugs of coffee and a plate of fresh-baked rolls. "Just came out of the oven," he explained, setting them down. "Thank you," Jennifer said, though she had no appetite. She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "Mr. Franklin, were you ever interviewed by the police after Sophie disappeared?" Franklin sat across from her, his weathered hands cupping his coffee mug. "Briefly. They spoke to all the vendors at the market that day. I told them I didn't see anything unusual, which was true. It was a busy morning. Lots of customers." Jennifer nodded, bringing out her phone. "I was looking at these pictures from that day." She showed Franklin the market photo on her phone, pointing to where he stood in the background behind Sophie. "You were very close to where she was last seen." He studied it, shaking his head sadly, saying he remembered the day vaguely, but didn't notice anything suspicious. "I wish I could help you, Mrs. Walsh. That poor girl, your daughter was such a bright thing. I remember her coming to the stall sometimes, always polite." As they talked, Jennifer noticed a small bookshelf in the corner near the employee area with several volumes that caught her attention. She squinted to see the titles, then felt her heart skip a beat as she recognized the distinctive spines of the Moonstone Chronicles, an obscure fantasy series that Sophie had been obsessed with before her disappearance. The coincidence seemed too striking to ignore. The series wasn't particularly popular or widely available. Jennifer had to special order the books from a specific bookstore 2 towns over. She'd never met another child who read them, let alone an adult. Jennifer commented on the books, mentioning what a coincidence it was since her daughter loved that exact series. They're not very well known. Sophie was obsessed with Princess Aria and her moonstone magic. Franklin appeared startled by her observation, quickly explaining that he enjoyed reading all sorts of books in his spare time. "I like to read a bit of everything. Fantasy helps pass the time during slow afternoons." "Who's your favorite character?" Jennifer asked casually, knowing any true fan would have one. Sophie loved Princess Aria, but I was partial to the Wizard Thorn myself. When Jennifer asked about his favorite character from the series, knowing any true fan would have one, Franklin stumbled awkwardly, clearly unfamiliar with the content. His answer revealed he'd never actually read them. "Oh, I like the main boy, with the sword," he offered vaguely, though there was no such character in the female-led fantasy series. He became visibly uncomfortable, fidgeting with his apron and avoiding eye contact. "I got them at a library sale," he muttered, his earlier warmth evaporating. "Though I haven't had time to read them yet." He glanced at the clock on the wall, then abruptly stood. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Walsh, but I have much to do before opening. The morning bake won't prepare itself." Jennifer took the hint, thanking him and apologizing for the intrusion. As she left, her mind raced with questions. Why would this baker have this specific, obscure series that her daughter loved, and why did he become so nervous when she asked about it? Outside in her car, Jennifer sat gripping the steering wheel, her heart pounding. The coincidence of finding Sophie's bracelet and bread from Franklin's bakery, followed by discovering he owned the same obscure book series Sophie loved, felt significant. His nervous reaction when questioned about the books only heightened her suspicion. She reached for her phone to call Martinez, then hesitated. What would she say? That Franklin owned books her daughter liked? That he seemed nervous when questioned about them? It was hardly evidence of wrongdoing. Still, combined with finding the bracelet in his bread and his presence at the market the day Sophie disappeared, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that George Franklin knew more than he was telling. She tried calling Martinez but got his voicemail. This time she left a message explaining her interaction with Franklin and the strange discovery of the rare book series, knowing how circumstantial the evidence sounded even as she described it. "These books were special ordered for Sophie," she explained in the message. "They weren't bestsellers you'd pick up anywhere, and he clearly hasn't read them despite claiming they're his." She ended with a plea for Martinez to call her back as soon as possible. Jennifer debated going home, knowing she should wait for proper police support, but something kept her rooted in place. She decided to wait and watch the bakery for another hour, just to see if anything unusual happened. The minutes ticked by slowly as Jennifer observed the bakery. Franklin moved back and forth behind the windows, preparing dough, checking ovens, and arranging baked goods on cooling racks. His movements were practiced and efficient, a man who had performed these tasks thousands of times. Around 3:30 a.m., Jennifer noticed Franklin leave through the side door again, this time carrying what appeared to be several small packages. He placed them carefully in the trunk of an older model sedan parked in the small lot beside the bakery, then returned inside. 15 minutes later, he emerged once more with another package and added it to the car. 20 minutes later, Jennifer noticed Franklin exit through the side door again, this time without a garbage bag. He locked the door behind him and walked purposefully down the alley toward what appeared to be a storage building behind the bakery. The small, shed-like structure sat about 50 feet behind the main bakery building, partially obscured by dumpsters. Jennifer hadn't noticed it during her earlier visits, nor had she seen police officers approach it during their investigation. Franklin looked around furtively before unlocking its door, checking over his shoulder in both directions before slipping inside. The secretive nature of his movements sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. This didn't seem like the behavior of a man simply checking on stored supplies. Jennifer waited, watching the storage building. After approximately 10 minutes, Franklin emerged, locked the door carefully, and returned to the main bakery. His posture seemed different now, shoulders tense, movements more hurried. Jennifer's curiosity intensified. The building didn't seem to be part of the main bakery space that police searched earlier, and Franklin's secretive behavior seemed odd for a man simply preparing the next day's bread. Perhaps he was hiding something in there, records related to his supply chain, or information that might explain how Sophie's bracelet ended up in the dough. She weighed her options. The responsible thing would be to wait for Martinez, to let the police handle the investigation properly. But what if Franklin removed whatever he was hiding before the police arrived? What if this was her only chance to find a connection to Sophie? Jennifer made a decision. She waited until Franklin returned to the main bakery before quietly leaving her car. The street remained deserted at this early hour. No witnesses to see her cross to the alley behind the bakery. She moved cautiously, staying close to the buildings and away from the pools of light cast by the street lamps. The storage building was a simple structure, about the size of a single-car garage, with weathered wooden siding and a metal roof. It matched the age and style of the main bakery building, suggesting it was built around the same time, perhaps originally used for coal or ice storage in the days before modern utilities. Jennifer found it locked, but a small window on the side provided a view inside. Using her phone's flashlight, dimmed under her fingers, she peeked through the glass. The space appeared to be a standard storage area with shelves of flour and other baking supplies, but something at the back caught her attention. A door that seemed out of place, newly installed compared to the rest of the building. The interior door had a modern appearance, with a fresh coat of white paint that stood out against the aged wood of the surrounding walls. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed a keypad lock on the door, suggesting it secured something more valuable than flour and sugar. Why would a simple storage shed for a small-town bakery need such sophisticated security? Jennifer tried to see more, but the angle of the window limited her view. She considered trying to find another way to look inside, but knew that would be trespassing, potentially compromising any evidence that might help find Sophie. Reluctantly, she retreated to her car, her suspicion now fully awakened. From her vantage point across the street, Jennifer continued her surveillance. The lights in the main bakery remained on as Franklin continued his preparations for the day. Occasionally, he disappeared from view, presumably working in parts of the bakery not visible from the street. Around 4:15 a.m., Franklin emerged from the side door again, this time carrying what appeared to be a tray covered with a cloth. He made his way to the storage building, unlocked it, and disappeared inside. This time he remained there longer, almost 20 minutes by Jennifer's count, before returning to the main bakery empty-handed. Just after 5 a.m., Franklin exited the bakery, looking around cautiously before heading to the storage building. This time he carried nothing, but his furtive manner sent another wave of unease through Jennifer. She waited until he disappeared inside, then quietly moved closer, positioning herself near the small window on the side of the storage structure. Through the window, she could see that the door with the keypad lock was now open, revealing a hidden room behind it. Franklin had entered this room, leaving the door ajar. From her angle, Jennifer could see only a small portion of the hidden space, what appeared to be a small bed or cot against one wall, and a small table with a lamp. The realization hit her with stunning force. This wasn't just storage, it was some kind of living space. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest. Could Sophie be in there? Could her daughter have been held captive in this hidden room all this time, just blocks from their home? The possibility seemed both incredible and horrifying. She strained to see more, to catch a glimpse of whoever might be inside that room, but Franklin's body blocked most of her view. She heard voices, but couldn't make out the words through the window glass and the distance. Jennifer retreated to her car, her hands shaking as she tried Martinez's number again. Still no answer. She debated calling 911, but hesitated. What exactly would she report? That a baker had a secured room in his storage building? That he was bringing food to someone hidden there? It sounded paranoid without concrete evidence, and a false alarm could jeopardize the investigation into Sophie's disappearance. She decided to wait a little longer to see if she could gather more information. After a few minutes watching the storage building from her car, Jennifer noticed Franklin hadn't emerged. Her concern growing, she made a decision. She needed to hear what was happening in that room. She quietly exited her vehicle and made her way back to the storage building, careful to stay in the shadows. Jennifer shifted position to get a better view through the small window. She could hear raised voices coming from the hidden room inside the storage building. Franklin's voice echoed, sharp with anger, though she couldn't make out the exact words. She pressed her ear closer to the glass, straining to hear. "I trusted you," Franklin's voice echoed, sharp with anger. "How could you do this to me? After everything I've done for you?" The response came in a voice so hauntingly familiar that Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. "I don't understand," the younger voice said, sounding frightened. Jennifer froze, her heart beginning to race. The voice, higher-pitched with that slight tremor. Could it be? "Don't play innocent with me," Franklin snapped. Jennifer saw him slam something down on a small table inside the room. Not a newspaper, as she first thought, but a printout of what looked like an email or police notice. "Someone found a bracelet in one of the bread loaves today. A purple heart bracelet with blue beads. The police came here with your mother." "My mom?" The young voice cracked with emotion. "She was here?" Jennifer's heart pounded violently in her chest. The voice? Could it possibly be Sophie's? After 2 years, her daughter's voice would have changed somewhat, but the cadence, the way the words tumbled out, it sounded so much like her. "You put that bracelet in the dough last night when I wasn't looking, didn't you?" Franklin's voice grew dangerously quiet. "No, it was an accident," the girl stammered. "It must have fallen in when I was helping you arrange the dough." "Liar!" Franklin roared. Jennifer saw him sweep his arm across the small table, knocking items to the floor of the confined space. 2 years! 2 years I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me." Jennifer shifted position again, desperate to see who Franklin was speaking to. Through the window, she glimpsed a girl with long brown hair backing away from Franklin in the small room. When she turned slightly, Jennifer gasped. Even in profile, even after 2 years, she recognized her daughter's face. Sophie had grown taller, her face had thinned, and her hair was longer, but the large glasses frames were the same, and the way she held her shoulders when scared was unmistakable. Jennifer clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Sophie was alive. Her daughter was alive and had been here, just blocks from their home, for 2 years. The realization was both ecstatic and horrifying. "That's it," Franklin said, running his hands through his hair. "We're done here. It's too risky to keep you here now." He grabbed a set of keys from his pocket. "You have 5 minutes to gather your things. We're leaving tonight, somewhere no one will ever find us." "No, please," Sophie begged, trying to pull away in the confined space. "I don't want to go." "This isn't a discussion," Franklin said coldly. 5 minutes, or we leave with nothing." Jennifer realized with horror that her suspicions were correct. Sophie had been held captive in this hidden room all this time, and if Franklin took her away tonight, Jennifer might never see her daughter again. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, dialing Martinez. To her relief, he answered promptly. "Detective Martinez," he said in his professional tone. "It's Jennifer Walsh," she whispered urgently. "I found Sophie. She's alive, at Franklin's Bakery storage building behind the main store." "Jennifer?" "Slow down," Martinez responded, immediately alert. "Where are you exactly?" "I'm outside the storage building behind Franklin's Bakery," she explained, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I can see Sophie through the window. Franklin's been keeping her in a hidden room these past 2 years, and now he's planning to take her away tonight. He's loading a van right now." Do not approach them, Martinez instructed firmly. Stay where you are and keep observing. I'm sending units to your location immediately. Jennifer watched in growing panic as Franklin grabbed Sophie's arm, forcing her to pack a small backpack. Hurry up, Jennifer whispered, watching Franklin pull Sophie toward the door of the hidden room. Units are on the way, he assured her. Stay hidden and do not engage. I'll be there in less than 5 minutes. Please hurry, Jennifer pleaded softly, not taking her eyes off the window. He's going to take her away. Jennifer, listen to me, Martinez said firmly. Do not approach Franklin. He's clearly dangerous, and you could put both yourself and Sophie at risk. Wait for backup. Jennifer knew he was right, but fear gripped her as she watched Franklin roughly guiding Sophie toward the storage building's door. They'd be outside any moment, and if they made it to the vehicle she spotted earlier, they could disappear before the police arrived. I'm 3 minutes out, Martinez responded. Units should be arriving any second. Stay hidden. Jennifer heard sirens in the distance, but worried they wouldn't arrive in time. She watched as Franklin opened the storage building door, checking outside before pulling Sophie with him. They emerged into the pre-dawn darkness, Franklin gripping Sophie's arm as he hurried her toward the side of the building where the car was parked. We need to be on the road before anyone realizes we're gone, Franklin snapped, yanking Sophie's arm when she hesitated. Please don't do this, Sophie begged, her voice carrying in the quiet dawn air. I want to go home. You lost your chance when you put that bracelet in the bread, he said. I took care of you when your mother abandoned you. She didn't abandon me, Sophie cried. You took me from her. Franklin's face contorted with anger. I saved you. Your mother wouldn't understand you like I do. All those books you love, who got them for you? Who built you a safe place? Who protected you from the world? Sirens sounded in the distance. Franklin panicked, his head jerking toward the sound. He cursed under his breath and began shoving Sophie toward the van more forcefully. Get in! Now, he ordered, his voice rising with desperation. Jennifer knew she couldn't wait. If they drove away, they could vanish forever. Despite Martinez's warnings, she stepped from the shadows. Sophie! Jennifer called, her voice breaking with emotion. They both froze. Sophie's eyes widened, finding her mother's face in the dim light. Mom? She whispered, as if afraid to believe what she was seeing. Get in the van, Franklin ordered, yanking Sophie's arm. Now! Let her go, Jennifer said, stepping closer. The police are coming. It's over. Franklin's expression darkened. She's mine now, he responded, pulling Sophie toward the van. We have a life together. You'll never understand what we have. Sophie twisted in his grip, trying to break free. Her eyes never left Jennifer's face. Mom! She cried again, reaching out with her free hand. Jennifer rushed forward, driven by maternal instinct and 2 years of desperate searching. She grabbed Sophie's outstretched hand, holding it tightly. Franklin yanked Sophie back, creating a tug-of-war with the terrified girl caught in the middle. Let go of her, he shouted at Jennifer. She belongs with me now. Let go of my daughter, Jennifer shouted, holding Sophie's hand tightly. She could feel her daughter trembling, could see tears streaming down her face in the dim light. Police cars screeched into the alley behind the bakery, their lights painting the scene in alternating red and blue. Officers emerged with weapons drawn. Police, don't move, an officer shouted. Franklin pushed Jennifer hard, trying to separate her from Sophie, but Jennifer maintained her grip on her daughter's hand. When he realized he couldn't break their connection, Franklin made a break for the van, abandoning Sophie in a desperate attempt to escape. He managed only 3 steps before 2 officers tackled him to the ground. Franklin struggled briefly before the officers subdued him, snapping handcuffs around his wrists as he continued to shout incoherently. Jennifer held Sophie close, both of them crying as they sank to the ground. After 2 years of separation, the reality of their reunion was overwhelming. Jennifer touched Sophie's face, her hair, her shoulders, as if to convince herself this was real, that her daughter was truly here in her arms. "I tried to get away," Sophie sobbed into her mother's shoulder. "I tried so many times." "You're safe now," Jennifer assured her, stroking her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." Detective Martinez approached, his expression a mixture of amazement and concern. "I told you to wait," he said to Jennifer, though there was no real anger in his voice. He was going to take her away, she responded simply, not loosening her hold on Sophie. Martinez nodded in understanding, then knelt to Sophie's level. "Hello, Sophie," he said gently. "I'm Detective Martinez. I've been looking for you for a very long time." Emergency medical personnel arrived to check Sophie's condition. Jennifer kept hold of her daughter's hand as the paramedics examined her, unwilling to let go even for a moment. The EMTs reported that Sophie appeared physically unharmed, but recommended a full examination at the hospital. "I want to go home," Sophie said quietly. "We need to make a stop at the hospital first," Jennifer explained gently. "And the police need to ask you some questions. But then we'll go home, I promise." "We need to get her statement while everything's fresh," Martinez explained gently to Jennifer as the paramedics finished their assessment. "I promise to keep it brief for today." Sophie clung to her mother as they were guided into a police cruiser. The ride to the station passed in a blur of emotion, Jennifer staring at her daughter's profile in disbelief, afraid she might disappear if she looked away, even for a moment. She noticed the changes in Sophie's face, still her daughter, but somehow older than her 14 years, her expression carrying a wariness that broke Jennifer's heart. At the station, they were ushered through a side entrance, avoiding the reporters who had already begun to gather at the main doors, alerted by scanner chatter about a missing child found alive after 2 years. Martinez personally escorted them to an interview room designed to be less intimidating than a standard interrogation space. Softer lighting, comfortable chairs, a small table with water bottles and tissues. Jennifer sat beside Sophie in the interview room at the police station, her arm protectively around her daughter's shoulders. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under Sophie's eyes, highlighting her exhaustion, but Jennifer couldn't stop looking at her. Couldn't believe she was really here. Detective Martinez sat across from them, his notebook open, but his manner gentle as he began the questioning. Sophie sat wrapped in a blanket, a cup of hot chocolate in her hands. Jennifer remained beside her, their shoulders touching, as Detective Martinez gently questioned her about her captivity. Sophie explained how Franklin had lured her away at the market 2 years ago, telling her that her mother had been in an accident and he was supposed to take her to the hospital. "By the time I realized we weren't going to the hospital, we were already at the bakery," Sophie said. "He locked me in that room behind the storage building. He told me you didn't want me anymore, that you were glad I was gone." Jennifer made a small sound of distress, and Sophie squeezed her hand. "I didn't believe him," Sophie continued. "Not really, but he took my phone and I couldn't get out. The door had a code lock and the window was too small. He said if I tried to escape, he'd hurt you." "How did your bracelet end up in the bread?" Martinez asked. "He made me help with the bread sometimes," Sophie explained. "When he wasn't looking, I dropped my bracelet in the dough. I remembered what Mom taught me about leaving clues if I was ever lost." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears at this revelation. Her daughter had remembered the safety lessons they had practiced years ago, had applied that knowledge in the most ingenious way possible. "I wasn't sure it would work," Sophie admitted. "I thought the bracelet might melt in the oven or that no one would find it, but I had to try something." Jennifer looked at her daughter with wonder. "Sophie," she said softly, still processing the miracle of having her daughter beside her. "Putting the bracelet in the dough was so brave, so clever." She paused, studying her daughter's face. "But honey, how did you know it wouldn't melt in that hot oven?" Sophie met her mother's gaze, a flicker of her former self showing through the exhaustion. "I wasn't sure, Mom," she admitted. "But I remembered you telling me the pendant was amethyst, a type of quartz, and the beads were glass." She recalled the details of a conversation from years before. "And the cord wasn't just plastic. You said it was a strong, special fiber." Jennifer remembered that day clearly, Sophie admiring the bracelet in the store window, Jennifer explaining why the slightly higher price was worth it for quality materials. Tears of pride welled in Jennifer's eyes. "Oh, Sophie," she whispered, hugging her gently, "you were so smart, so incredibly brave." Detective Martinez nodded in agreement. "She absolutely was. That clue, Sophie, that single act, is what brought you home." The investigation revealed Franklin's double life, a respected baker who had secretly kept Sophie isolated for 2 years, convincing her that her family had abandoned her. In his twisted mind, he had convinced himself that he was rescuing Sophie, providing her with the books she loved, and creating a safe space for her away from the world. "He kept bringing me those Moonstone books," Sophie explained. "He said they were my favorites, and that proved he knew me better than anyone else. He was so mad when I told him I'd already read them all." As the questioning continued, Jennifer learned the full extent of her daughter's captivity. The small hidden room where she'd spent most of 2 years, allowed out only occasionally to help in the bakery when no one else was around, given enough food and basic necessities, but denied freedom and contact with the outside world. The resilience Sophie had shown, maintaining hope through those long months, searching for ways to signal her presence, culminating in the inspired act of placing her bracelet in bread dough, filled Jennifer with both heartbreak and pride. Martinez closed his notebook, explaining they would need more detailed statements later, but the basics were sufficient for now. Officers had already seized Franklin's computer from the bakery, finding disturbing evidence of his obsession. "Will I have to see him again?" Sophie asked quietly, her voice small. "In court?" Martinez shook his head reassuringly. "We're doing everything possible to avoid that. Franklin is already talking, hoping for leniency in sentencing. We have more than enough evidence without putting you through a trial." Relief washed over Sophie's face. "Good. I don't want to see him ever again." "You won't have to," Jennifer assured her, squeezing her hand. A police psychologist had already spoken briefly with Sophie, explaining to Jennifer afterward that recovery would take time. Sophie had spent 2 formative years, from 12 to 14, in isolation, missing school, friends, and normal development. There would be adjustments, therapy, possibly setbacks. But the doctor had emphasized Sophie's remarkable resilience, evidenced by her clever escape plan. As they left the police station, the pale morning light filtered through the high windows, casting long, soft shadows across the parking lot. Jennifer kept her arm around Sophie's shoulders, feeling how thin she'd become. The road ahead would be long, filled with healing from invisible scars. Therapy and difficult conversations awaited, but they would face it together. For the first time in 2 years, Jennifer's heart felt complete. Her daughter was home.